we're gonna try to continue to power through. Anyway, I wanted to touch on this. I didn't plan on touching on this when we first started the show, but after um, after I was preparing for the show, I saw this tweet late from JP Finley, and he retweeted a tweet from somebody else, and essentially, the tweet said that Washington is one of 4 teams that isn't above the 50% threshold that the NFL has not necessarily mandated, but has thrown out there as the number that they want for teams to have in order to have some liberties and the relaxing of some rules that they've put in place to protect teams from COVID. And I think that number actually might be like 75%. I don't get me to lying, because I don't actually know the specific number. I just know Washington is one of 4 teams. As a matter of fact, I'll pull up the tweet so I can read it to you and give you guys an idea of where we stand on that. And I know some of you really don't care, but it does impact the team. So this tweet is from @RobMatty, who writes, Washington, Arizona, Indianapolis, and Los Angeles Chargers remain under 50% vaccination for COVID-19 as of today, per a source familiar with the NFL's vaccination rates. Pittsburgh, Miami, Carolina, and Denver have the highest rates and are among 7 teams with at least 85% vaccinated. It says teams on the lower end of the vaccination chart face potential competitive disadvantages, especially because the NFL doesn't plan to cancel any games this season, per my source. So essentially what he's saying is, if you run into some issues with this COVID-19 thing this year, the league won't be making any accommodations for you. So they've already talked about travel restrictions and things that you have to do, protocol that you have to follow if you don't have over 50% of your players vaccinated. We haven't met that threshold. And you already saw that guys had pushback like Montez Sweat. And look, I'm not going to tell anybody what they need to do. You have the choice. You can or you can't. You do or you don't. I don't care either way. You know, that's what they decide to do. That's what they decide to do. So it really doesn't bother me at all. But the thing that becomes a little dicey is, and look, guys did a great job last year when COVID was much more rampant of keeping themselves safe, isolating from people that could be problematic, and making sure they gave themselves a chance to play each and every single week. We were one of the better teams in the league at steering clear of COVID. The guys that ultimately contracted COVID on the team weren't even active. You know, Matt Ioannidis was one of those guys. They weren't active, so they weren't around the team. The guys that were playing week in and week out, those guys kept themselves clean. So I think there's an opportunity for this team to bypass some of the things that may be obstacles for them just off of what they did last year. But last year is last year, this year is this year. You know, so we'll see what will happen. But it is worth noting that Washington right now hasn't met that 50% threshold. And right now they're sitting there. We don't really know what is going to happen. And all we can say is, if we don't get to 50 and we have a COVID outbreak, we're screwed. You know what I'm saying? Now, again, Rich Eisen is vaccinated. Chris Paul was vaccinated. They both contracted COVID-19. So there are no guarantees in this thing. You get vaccinated. There is no guarantee that just because you're vaccinated means you're going to not get COVID. So at the end of the day, my hope is they do what they did last year. Whether they get vaccinated or not, they find a way to keep themselves from contacting people who are engaging in risky behaviors. Keep your circle tight. That's what it really is all about. Is what it boils down to is keeping your circle tight, making sure that you're not hanging around people that are engaging in risky behavior. And a risky behavior could be just going out and clubbing or something that is in the grand scheme of things really, really minuscule. But because of where we are with this thing, you just got to distance yourself from people like that. So we'll see. That's something to keep, a note of. It's something to be mindful of. But at the end of the day, I really don't give a shit personally. As long as we don't have anybody test positive for COVID, it's not a story. It's not an issue. It only becomes an issue if somebody tests positive for COVID. That's when they'll say, see, you didn't have your 50%. It could happen to anybody though. So hopefully it's not us. That's all we can say. Got another super chat from Gary Clutch Clark. Thank you for the super chat, Gary Clutch Clark. Really do appreciate you. Who writes, just saw Grant Paulson retweet a report that Washington has less than 50 players vaccinated. How disappointed are you in this? This is a big deal. So you must have gotten here not too long ago, because that's what I started the show with. I saw that same tweet that you're referring to, and I talked about it for about a good 7 minutes of the show. So if you want to check that out, you can go back in the archives when this is done and check out the first 7 to 10 minutes I spent on the show talking about the Washington football team being one of 4 teams that's not above that 50% threshold. But just to answer your question, I'm not really that disappointed. I could care less, honestly. Is it a big deal? It could potentially be. But for me right now, because we were so good with COVID last year, I'm giving them the benefit. I wanted to sing right there. I can't sing Pebbles. So just sing it in your head for me. I'll be giving you the benefit. I still got it out. Okay. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, because giving them the benefit of the doubt. Giving you a minute to try to work it on out. I'm giving them a benefit to try to work it on out, because they were able to do what a lot of teams were able to do last year in the face of COVID when it was at its peak. They were one of the teams that really didn't have any issues with it last year. So because of that, they've built up equity with me personally. I can't speak for you guys as fans. They built up equity with me that I think they can make smart decisions and not jeopardize themselves or their teammates. We'll see what happens though. Last year things were a lot more closed in and you weren't able to do as much. So it was a lot easier to keep yourself isolated at home. The world is opening back up a bit more now. And so there are opportunities for you to get into some shit on an off week, or, you're playing the Vegas Raiders and you like, shit, we in Vegas, we gonna do it up while we here. It's an opportunity for you to get into some shit and come back and have COVID. So is it a thing? Yeah, it could be a real big deal, but I'm not making it a deal right now. I'm not. So, but I did touch on that early in the show, Gary Clutch Clark. So if you want to check that out, please, by all means, go back and do so. Thank you for that super chat.
LouieTeeNetwork.